What's up, guys? Jesse Miller here again, and we are on number 4 of 10 worship leading techniques for immediate improvement. Number 4 is always be recruiting. I can't stress this one enough. This is so important. If you want to grow your team, if you want to grow in your worship leading abilities at your church, you have to continually recruit. You cannot stop when you have what you think is a great team. You have to still find more people to add to your team. And there's a number of reasons why, which we're going to get into today, but we're talking today about always be recruiting. If you have your sheet, let's look at it. In our key verse is Mark chapter 1 and verse 16 through 18. New King James Version says, "And as he walked by the Sea of Galilee," this is Jesus, "he saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then Jesus said to them, 'Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men.' Immediately left their nets and followed him." And that you say, well, that's Jesus, and he only picked 12. Well, there's only 12 that followed with him, but we also know there were some women that followed him and provided him money. We know that he sent out 70 other disciples. So we know that there were many disciples of Jesus besides just the 12. So Jesus was continually teaching and preaching. You remember when he fed the 5,000? Well, that was just the men, you know. And so there was at least 20,000 people there. We also know that he fed the 4,000. So there was at least 16,000 people there if you count men, women, and children. So he had crowds following with him many different places. Remember when he got in the Sea of Galilee and he'd get in the boat because of the size of the crowd? And so we've got to understand that Jesus was continually recruiting people. If your mission is important enough then to you, then you recruit. If you believe in what you're doing, then you're going to recruit people to be on your team. If you don't believe, you're not going to recruit. If you think your worship team is terrible, then you're not going to look for people to add to your team. But that's exactly the opposite mindset of what you should have. If you want to have a great team, then you have to constantly be looking for people that you can add to your team. You have to constantly be growing. And here's what I see a lot of people do. They get in this box of us 4 and no more. You know, they get stuck in this box. Well, we have a great team. We have 5 of us. There's 5 of us here. So, you know, and we can do the drums and the guitar and the bass and electric and the keys. And we don't really need any more singers. We're good, man. People really enjoy what we're doing. Well, let's think about this. That's kind of a narrow mindset to have if you think your only job as a worship leader is to provide a Sunday morning experience. You're leaving out youth, you're leaving out children, you're leaving out teams to go and minister in your community, you're leaving out conferences, you're leaving out missions trips. There's so many things that a worship leader can do to reach out into their community and build the church and help the church grow. And so if you're only thinking about us 4 and no more, then you have a very short-sighted vision. Go back and watch number 3, how to create a compelling vision and cast a vision. That's very important. Number 4, you have to be recruiting. What happens if your best drummer moves away? What are you going to do? What happens if your only drummer moves away? That's a better question. What happens if your guitarist moves away? What happens if your lead second in command singer decides to go be a part of a church or get another church and gets offered a position elsewhere? What happens if somebody leaves? You have to be constantly thinking about these things. We have to be recruiting. You're going to burn your team out if you have the same people that do a Thursday night practice, do a Sunday morning run through, do a Sunday morning, and if you have 2 services especially, and then you have, let's say, a Sunday night service. Maybe you have a Wednesday night service. Maybe you are involved in the youth. Maybe it's your same team you're dragging to all these different places, and you're not recruiting more people to be a part of your team. You're going to wear them out. And there's going to come a point where either they're going to say, man, I just can't do all that. And so then you're going to have fragments of your team in all these different places. Well, two of us can be here, two of us can be here. Have you ever thought about building two teams? That's one thing I did to be successful. Build a couple teams. Have a Sunday team, have a Wednesday team, have a youth team and a Sunday team. We did that for a while. Maybe you have two services and you have a first service team and a second service team. Or maybe you just take the same people and you have two drummers and three drummers, and you have two or three guitarists, and you have a sign up, and then you rotate those people in between the different days and times that you need. So you're always going to need more people. If you're a church of 10,000, you need to always be recruiting. If you're a church of 60, you need to always be recruiting. I can't state it enough how important it is to keep finding people for your team. Couple things it'll do. One, it'll keep your guys fresh, help you out. But number two, it will bless other ministries within your church. Number three, it'll avoid burnout. And number four, you'll be a blessing to your pastor or your leader because you have organized a team. It's a team effort. You're using people from your congregation and they're being used for God. And so it's a win-win situation for you to be recruiting. So how do you do this? Well, first of all, on your paper, we said start with the why. You've got to give them a reason. There's got to be a reason why you're doing this. So first of all, like we were saying, keep your team fresh. Don't allow burnout. Give them a break. Number two, help other ministries within your church. Children, youth, small groups. Help those other ministries out. Help build the team for the church. We're building for the entire church, not just for your little department, but for the whole church. This is a team effort. Everything we do is as a team to help build the body of Christ. Another thing, discover hidden talent. Find excellent musicians who are hiding in plain sight. There's people in your congregation that maybe the last praise and worship leader wasn't good at this, and they saw that the praise and worship team was just discombobulated. Everybody's doing their own thing. There's no cohesion. You don't have a vision. You don't have a purpose for being. That maybe the last worship leader wasn't getting along with the pastor. Who knows what the reason is? But there are people that are excellent musicians in your congregation that have never wanted to be a part of the worship team before, but now you're here, and so you can recruit them. There's people that are sitting in your congregation that are excellent guitarists, keyboardists, bass guitarists, cellists. Is that how you say it? Cellist? Celloist? Okay, that's probably better. Probably better way to say it. Violin. If you can bear it, maybe even a flautist. If you can't, I understand. I've never had a flute as part of my main worship time. Sorry, flute players, no offense, we love you all, but there's just not many songs where you can mix that flute sound in with a congregational type singing and it sound good. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of different people that you can find. Here's another thing, and it's on your paper: evangelism and discipleship. You can find great talent on Craigslist. You can find great talent from colleges and universities. There are colleges and universities with students who are from out of town who have moved here and nobody's reaching out to them. But the minute somebody reaches out and says, hey, I need a musician, I need a bass player, I need a guitarist. It's, you can decide, is it going to be volunteer? Is it going to be paid? But this is a great way to bring people in from your community, from outside of your church. Maybe they need a home church and they're like, wow, hey, these guys over here need me to come play. I'm going to come and be a part of their church. A lot of times they never get reached out to. And they can be from secular or Christian colleges in your community. What are you doing to reach those people? That's an evangelism point. And you say, well, I want to make sure that they fully line up and they've got to be at my church for 6 months. Okay, fine. If you want to make that rule, go ahead. I'm not going to make that rule. I did a long time ago, and it was dumb. So I'm sorry if you have that rule. I'm sorry if you need to get to know them. That's fine. I'm not going to say anything against you, but what I'm going to say is this. If you're not going to look at the opportunities within your congregation to get people plugged in, then you're missing opportunities. Now, you have your rules, 6 months. They got to be a part of the church for a year before I'll let them do anything in our church. Well, we just read a verse about Jesus who's walking along the Sea of Galilee, and he sees Simon and he sees Andrew, and he says, "Come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men." Now, how much vetting did Jesus Christ do to bring those people and make them as part of his 12 disciples? I mean, Simon Peter, when Jesus rose from the dead and descending into heaven, shortly after that, Simon Peter preaches and 3,000 people get saved in one day. And that was only three and a half years of being with Jesus. And next thing you know, he's one of the first mega pastors. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that you're being short-sighted if you only look at the people that are just right there in your congregation, and then you make these rules and say, well, but you've got to be part of our church for 6 months. I think you're missing an opportunity for evangelism here. I think you're missing an opportunity. Look, if I find a kid and, you probably have a rule that they need to be saved. Okay, that's wisdom. I get that. But I'm so radical about this that I think that, them being with you, now you never put them in a position of authority, but I believe somebody wants to be a part of a church, then they're at least interested in the gospel, right? So why can't evangelism happen with somebody that's talented, that has, at least an ambition towards becoming a Christian, that at least understands what you're about? Maybe you have them sit in the service for a week and observe, and then you have a conversation with that person. So what did you think about the service? What did you think about what we're doing here? Is this something that you'd like to be a part of? I mean, this is my interview process when I'm talking to somebody that's a potential person that I want to bring on my worship team. I'm going to ask them some questions, because even if they are a Christian, I don't want them just joining because they're a Christian and they can play guitar. Do you understand the vision that we've laid out for you, Bob? Nancy, do you understand the vision and the direction that we're going? Is this something that you think you might want to be a part of? I want you to go home and pray about it. But if you feel like it's something that you could be a part of, then let's meet next week. Come to the practice, and we're going to talk, and we're going to sit down, and we're going to find out how we can best use you. Now, they may say, well, I'm a drummer. Okay. But just because you're a drummer doesn't mean you're just going to drum on the Sunday morning worship in 1 week. We've got to talk about this. We've got to make sure that that's the best place for you. And so you're already kind of given an audition, because if somebody's even slightly talented, I want to use them, man. If I can use them in the youth group, I'm going to use them in the youth group. And then as their skill level progresses, we can move them into other places. Because guess what? Not everybody is at this level when they start. They might be here and they have a lot of promise, and we got to help coach them up into the next level, into the next level, into the next level. So my question to you is, what are you doing to recruit? Here's another reason why you would want to recruit all the time: to grow your team and produce a fuller and thicker sound. Maybe you've got, somebody on your team that can play 2 instruments. Maybe they can play bass, perfect. Maybe they can play guitar as well, great. I mean, if they can play guitar and bass, they can probably play electric and acoustic and bass. So they're multi-talented, they're multifaceted. That's great. But right now you have one bass player, and you have that person, you've got them doing the rhythm guitar, okay? And you don't recruit anybody because you're like, well, I can always rely on that bass. Well, I don't want to rely on that bass. I want to bring somebody else in, and then I have a fuller sound. At the very minimum, I want to have a fuller sound. I want it to be thick. I want it to be something that's got volume to it. I mean, ladies, you don't go to the hair salon and say, make my hair as thin as possible with no volume. I mean, I see commercials on TV. I don't really know anything about hair, okay? But I do hear the commercials, and they're like, it's got a volumizer on it. Great, whatever that is, okay? But I know that ladies want thick hair. They want their hair to have some volume to it. They don't want it to be thin. They don't want it to have, I've heard my wife say something about teasing her hair. I don't know what that means, people, but I do know that people want volume. Now, not like 80s volume, not Buffon volume, but nowadays you still want to have volume. And so your team, your worship team, you want to have volume. You want it to have a thick sound. Another thing, like we talked about already, but is we want to lighten the load for our leader, for our pastor. Look, your leader or pastor should be the greatest recruiter of people to come to the church, okay, for the church as a whole. But you should be the greatest recruiter for your worship team. And what's that going to do? Well, if your pastor, your leader, knows that they can count on you to lead your team and to do an excellent job, then they don't have to worry about that aspect of the church. They can worry about what am I going to do for preaching? What am I going to do for an altar call? What am I going to do to bring more people into the main service, not just into the worship team? So you're lightening the load. And I see too many times where pastors with good hearts, they do everything in the church. But any good pastor, any good leader understands that at some point you can't do everything. You've got to delegate. You've got to give it away. And so the greatest people that I've ever had work for me, not just in a church setting, but in the corporate world, are people that I could trust them to do, and I didn't have to check up on their work. I mean, there's several people that come to mind immediately that all I had to do was tell them once, and I never had to check back. And when I did, I always knew that it was done because they said they would do it, and they did what they said they would do. As you as a worship leader, when you take on that responsibility, don't wait for your pastor to ask you things. Say, hey, guess what? I did this and I implemented that. And if you want to make any changes, that's fine. But I just want you to know that we're working towards something here. We're building something. I've got my vision statement in place. I want to meet with you, pastor. I want to meet with you, leader. I want to make sure that we're on the same page, going in the same direction so that we can bring as many people to Jesus as possible. And so you get on the same page and you lighten that leader's load. Takes a load off. Takes a load off of them. Because remember, we talked about it in getting to know your leader. The leader has all these facets of ministry to worry about. You just have yours. And so you're lightening their load by recruiting people. As long as you have the permission to do this, run these people by the pastor. Most pastors were always thankful when I was building a team. I did have one pastor who wanted me to run everyone by him. Okay, I didn't last at that church too long because everybody had an issue or a problem and nobody could be used. So I said, well, I'm not going to be very useful to you here because my goal is to try to bring as many people into the kingdom as possible, and I'm not going to play politics. And so most pastors, like I'm telling you, are good, hardworking people that their main desire is to see as many people come to the knowledge of the truth as possible. And so the vast majority, 98% of the pastors out there, would love it if their worship leader took the reins on this. I promise you. And maybe there is a few people that you need to run by them that are wolves in sheep's clothing. Okay, I get that. But what I'm saying is most of them would be thrilled to have somebody who would take the reins and look and recruit people for these positions. So here's a thing on page 2 that I want to look at. Why leaders don't recruit. Okay, let's look at this. Number 1, they're comfortable with how things are right now. See, there's a big problem with this. There's a lot of people who are just comfortable. Well, brother, I mean, everything's good. Everything's going good. We're doing good. People are happy. All right. Well, you've got an average worship team. That's great. Okay, but you're not looking at growth. And we should be growing in every area of our life. Do you understand that when we don't grow, when we don't try to get better personally, we're moving backwards? When you don't grow, you're actually moving backwards. You've got to be, because there's always going to be something pushing up against you. And so you have to understand, you've got to be uncomfortable with how things are right now. If you're comfortable, then you're going to keep singing those old songs that nobody sings on the radio anymore. You're going to keep singing songs that are irrelevant. You're going to keep doing things the way you've always done it, and you're going to keep getting what you've always gotten. I have a feeling that if you have gotten to number 4 and you've listened to me for over 2 hours now, because I've given you over 2 hours of content, probably close to 3 hours you've been listening to me, then hopefully you're the type of person that doesn't want to stay where you're at. You want to get better. You want to grow. Maybe you're a new worship leader. Maybe you've been leading worship for a long time and you're stuck in a rut. And you say, hey, I need to get out of this rut. I need to kick the ends out and crawl out of this thing. Okay, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you see things that maybe are reasons why you're stuck, because everything's good. We're good, but there's something more. I want something more. And so you've got to be uncomfortable. Maybe you're in this next group, you're embarrassed with how things are right now. You're like, man, we don't have, it's all we can do to get through a song. It's kind of embarrassing. Okay, I get that too. Been there, done that. But if you're stuck in that place where you're embarrassed of your team, okay, well, what do you need to do? You need to recruit. You need to find some fresh blood, man. You've got to get an infusion. You need to make some changes right away, today, right now. I don't mean go and fire your whole team, but you need to start bringing in excellence. You need to look for these opportunities. You need to look for people. You need to look for singers. There's, hopefully, if your church is growing, there's people that are coming, new people that you can recruit. You need to find these people and bring them into your team. It's going to help you so much. Here's another reason. It requires work. Hey, if you're going to recruit a team, you're going to have to reteach them all the things that all the regulars know. You're going to have to tell them when practices are. You're going to have to help coach them up. You're going to have to tell them how you do things. You're going to have to show them the vision. You're going to have to continually keep the mission and the vision in front of them. You're going to have to go over all this stuff. You're going to have to repeat yourself. I get it. It's a lot of work to recruit people. But do you want to get better? Do you want to stay average? Do you want to have an average worship team, or do you want to, when you see a worship song come on the radio, does that get you excited? Like, man, wouldn't it be awesome if we could have worship sound like that? If that gets you excited, then start recruiting today. I promise you it'll help. Another thing, they never realized the advantages of recruiting a team. Some people just have never thought about what growing your team could do for your church, for your small groups, for your youth, for your children. They've never thought about that. Honestly, have never thought about that. And so if this is the first time you're thinking about this, I want to expand your mind. I want to expand your horizons. I want you to see that there's more, that there's something better, that you can, in a small town, in a small church, grow. Trust me, I was in a church of 200 and we grew to over 350. And we did it by changing the worship. We did it by reaching out into the community. We did it by doing dramas. We did it by doing praise and worship in a school. One night, we had our awesome worship band come into a YMCA where there was 400 students from the high school and the junior high, and 70 of them made a commitment to Jesus Christ that night. And it was because of the worship. It was because of the preaching. It was because we got up and we presented the gospel. Their hearts were soft. They were ready to hear. And that's what worship does. And that's why you got involved in it. And that's why you need to recruit people, because you need to see beyond your four walls. You need to see, what could a worship team do in my community? How could we be a blessing outside of the body of Christ? What could we do to bring people into our church? What could we do to bring people into the knowledge of the saving power of God? And so And then the last thing, the us for and no more mentality has closed out the vision of the church at large. The us for and no more. It's the greatest killer of everything that God wants to do to expand the message of Jesus in the last days. We're happy. We're satisfied. We've got our box. This is our box. And you're a newcomer, so we don't want you coming in our box. That's a problem, people. It's a problem when we get into our little box and we don't let anybody else in. You're never going to grow. You're never going to get better. Your worship will never get better. If you get in this mentality of this is our box of people, you're never going to do better or get better. You've got to expand your horizons. You've got to be recruiting people continually. Man, if you believe in the vision of your church, then you should have a mission and a statement that matches that vision, and people will want to join you. Look, I wrote this. Here's my quote for today. There is never a better time to start building your team than today, tomorrow, next month, or 5 years from now. The day you stop recruiting is the day you stop growing, both in numbers and in resolve to accomplish the vision. So I want you to take this, think of some more things. Why don't people recruit? And then what am I going to do to take action? What am I going to do to make a change today? How am I going to change my worship team? How am I going to get better? What am I going to do to get better? Ask yourself the hard questions, and you'll get some easy answers from God, I promise. All right? We'll see you on the next time. And next time we're going to talk about how to craft a biblical worship set. It's going to be great. You don't want to miss it.